So good evening, everybody. So we've just got Kate, who's just arrived, and we've got Kristy here. So they're going to sit down there, and I hope this sort of vaguely works. There's a lot of other people sort of in the audience, and there may well be some more joining. But thank you all very, very much for joining us. And we look forward very much to you enjoying this tasting. And just to tell you a little bit about what we're going to do, we are basically going to, sit. So we are basically going to taste 6 different chocolates, all made from beans from Africa. And for some of those, we even actually have beans from those countries. So we can actually sort of taste how different the beans are to the bars. That will not, unfortunately, apply to you guys at home or to you guys who are sort of watching it after the event. But it's very exciting for us. And it should last about an hour. If you've got any questions, just unmute yourselves if you are on the call, or otherwise, if you're in the audience, you are free to shout, scream, and do whatever else you would like. And we're just having fans handed out here, which is very useful. It is very, very hot here. Right, so Kristy, thank you so much for coming. Kristy's basically literally FOB, which stands for fresh off the boat, because she's literally just got off a boat from Tilbury, where she's been sort of touring around Europe with people, showing them the Normandy beaches, and not doing your Antarctic swim. And you've done that? Oh, wow. Well, so what I was about to tell you is that Kristy has one of the most unique stories to her marriage that I think anyone has ever come across. So this is how I'm going to start this off, just to show you the breadth of Kristy's amazing experience. So Kristy, as well as being an expert on cocoa and being a professor of many, many different things, decided at one point to take a sabbatical and go and become postmaster or postmistress general. Postmaster general in Antarctica.
Deputy postmaster of the British Antarctic Territory.
Okay, so to me that means that you are the postmistress of Antarctica, which I think is pretty cool and pretty amazing. And when you were there, you met a lovely man who'd basically gone to go and do an ice mile swim.
Yes.
Which is fairly insane at the best of times. Normally when you swim an ice mile, it's like 3 or 4 degrees. Anything under 5 degrees counts as being okay. But your husband decided that he wants to do it at below 0.
Yeah, it was 0.
Because because ice water freezes below 0.
Yeah, because it's salt water.
Salt water.
So it's okay.
And you basically obviously warmed him in lots of different ways, and you got married to him, which is a great way of basically kicking this all off. But anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to taste all these different chocolates. And Kristy's going to basically, I'm going to ask Kristy and Kate lots of different questions about them and about what's been happening. But we're going to start.
They can't see you though.
They can sort of vaguely see me.
Yeah, because I want you to also have.
We can sort of vaguely see. I have to sort of lean in. So nice. But you don't really want me leaning in. I think we'll sort of lean out and lean back in. So there we go. Right. So for those of you who've got chocolates at home, I'm going to hold up the chocolates as we go through them. And then for those of you who don't have chocolates, I'm going to sort of tempt you as we all describe the different tasting notes to them. But there is a sort of order to this chocolate because it's an African cacao tasting. So what we're going to start with is a chocolate crafted in Aveiro in Portugal. And Sue and Tomoko-san will probably kill me for my pronunciation there. But it's basically in Portugal, but it's made from beans which are grown in São Tomé. So, and São Tomé, which we will talk about in a minute, was one of the first places in Africa where cacao was grown, but it's also the site of a very big scandal to do with slavery, which is a problem which continues and a debate which continues to this very day. So should we start with that one? So for everybody who's in the room, it's actually a bit easier because the chocolates are laid out in numbers, so you can't get it wrong. But for the rest of us, it's for those of you who are there, anything else like that. So while we start this, should we talk a little bit about African slavery and what happened in São Tomé, or?
Yeah, look, I mean, São Tomé is a tiny island. São Tomé and Príncipe are a pair of islands that together make a nation state, and they're in the Gulf of Guinea, not too far from Ghana. And they were the largest cocoa producers in the world, believe it or not, for I think 2 years. They reached #1. Around the turn of the 20th century. I think the second year that they were the largest cocoa producer in the world must have been 1910, because 1911 was when Ghana became the largest cocoa producer in the world. And I always remember that Ghana took over from another West African country. Of course, before that, of course, it had been Ecuador for many years. And so, but you see with São Tomé and Príncipe, the rise of West African cocoa production, but for really different reason than Ghana was able to become such a large cocoa producer. In Sao Tome and Principe, it was truly slave labor on plantations. And so the way it happened was Portugal colonized Sao Tome. Portugal also colonized other parts of mainland Africa, including Angola. And they would take people from primarily Angola, but other parts of their other colonies as well, and bring them to Sao Tome and put them to work on the plantations there. And so it was really through the use of slave labor in the way that we think of it in the United States, you know, in the same kind of category, that became that made Sao Tome become such a large cocoa producer. And so it's a sad history, a really, really tragic history. But now Sao Tome has really changed. Now Sao Tome is really, I think, very progressive and very forward in its cocoa production. Yep. Really, really well-run cooperatives. The folks I know who source from Sao Tome speak highly of its ethics, of its quality. And so Sao Tome has been one of these places that has really been able to reverse the narrative, I think, in a way, and become a beacon of ethical production and also quality in West Africa. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it is worth sort of saying it's one of the few cases where actually boycotts work.
Yes.
It's a sort of very, and we're not, I think we're probably going to talk a bit about, you know, what sort of action we can all take at a later point, but it is interesting that the sort of story is that Cadbury's in particular got caught and was accused, and was a very bad court case, very embarrassing for them in the 1900s. And it was then picked up, this whole issue of Cadbury's knowingly using slave labor on their plantations in the British press, and also by the suffragettes and the suffragists who organize a boycott, and it actually works. And I think this is one of the reasons why, as you sort of were saying, sort of Ghana picks up and goes. But we should all now, I think for once, we're actually not going to be able to snap the chocolate and actually get much of a snap. It's already basically melting as you sort of pick it up, but it is worth picking up. And this is a typical Sao Tome bar. It is definitely a soft break. It's more like liquid at this point, but it does have those sort of lovely. Also, for those of you, you should have all also got your tasting wave, which we always find quite useful to sort how it works. So, I mean, and just the background on the makers here. Sue is an ex-chef, and Tomoko-san actually has a very, I think she's the only one I know in the chocolate world who's actually an ex-opera singer, and she makes the chocolate with Sue in Aviero. But they fell in love with Sao Tome chocolate and then brought this stuff back. And I mean, there are lots of great makers, Julio Corralo. There's lots of great makers now back in Sao Tome, but it did take them a very, very long time to recover.
Yes, it did. It did. So, because after that, after the Cadbury boycott, you know, everyone else joined the boycott as well. And then, you know, the big chocolate makers, and then Sao Tome production just plummeted, right? Because
unfortunately, in Ghana, which is the next one we're going to go to, Ghana was waiting in the wings and able to sort of, you know, sort of like bounce up production to, so the next bar that we're going to try is a bar made by, I'm good friends of both Kate and Kristy's, which is the great Mocha, which we're going to be sort of trying next. But this is from your favorite, and I'm going to try and pronounce this right, Abokfa. Yes. Kristy spent about 3 weeks trying to get me to basically pronounce the name of this fantastic cooperative in Ghana correctly. But let's talk a little bit about Ghanaian chocolate, because it's a good way of getting into really why it took, I think. So my theory as to why it took us so long to get cacao out of West Africa is all to do with diseases, but it's all to do with malaria, because until the mid-19th century, we didn't have a way that basically you could colonize most of Africa. So even though the Portuguese have got all the islands and bits of Angola, and even though Madagascar's gone a bit, until you've got quinine, until you've got ways to defeat malaria, you couldn't really get into mainland Africa. But then I think when you can, there are all these great stories about German missionaries and British governors.
The Swiss German, the Basel missionaries played a huge role, you know, in the growth of cocoa.
You think, but who would you sort of credit? I'm putting in some
for sure. And at the time it was the Gold Coast, right? It was the British colony of the Gold Coast. So at the time you would have said the Gold Coast farmers. And you know, once the Sao Tome boycott happened, it was really, it's from a historical perspective, it's very interesting, because even though the Gold Coast was a colony, it was free labor, right? No one was being forced to do the work of farming cocoa like we saw in Sao Tome. And so, and one of the great illustrations of that is that there were, of course, colonial pressures to grow cocoa. There's no doubt about it. But by and large, farmers made their own decision to grow cocoa in the Gold Coast. Everyone had been growing oil palm, natural rubber up until that point. And as the prices of those commodities fell, remember, this is around the turn of the 20th century when all of the big chocolate companies are starting to scale up, right? Mass marketed chocolate is just beginning around this time. And that means demand was going up. When demand for something goes up, the price goes up, right? And so in the Gold Coast, the farmers were making smart economic choices because they saw, okay, these crops we've been growing for a long time and exporting to Europe are diminishing in value, but cocoa is increasing in price. Let's grow it, right? And so you saw this tremendous explosion of cocoa farms literally across the Gold Coast. And in 1911, then Ghana becomes the world's largest cocoa producer and taking over the #1 position from Sao Tome, which it retained for the next like 60 or 70 years. I think it was 70 years. Ghana was the #1 producer of cocoa in the world.
And this bar explains why we value it so highly.
It really does. I think, what do you taste in this bar? And I think people online can do the chat if you want, but what notes do you get from the Mocha Origins Abokfa chocolate sample?
I get cardamom.
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 That's very nice. Very nice.
Do you think the name gives anything away? Bit of coffee? I get a bit of coffee in it. That always got this lovely brownie, podgy.
Brownie.
For sure.
I mean, it is, to me, this is the epitome of Ghanaian hot chocolate brownie. Cake is, yeah, it is basically, this is like having your cake and eating it, in every sense of the word.
It is. It's the classic chocolate flavor, right?
This is what we all think.
Fudge.
This is the reason why people smuggle cacao into caramel.
Mm.
Yeah. But I mean, and there's a great story behind Abok. I mean, well, behind Abok firm is also a great story behind Mocha. So do you want to know the story behind? Which one would you like to do? You want to do? You'll do Abok and I'll do Jack.
And this is in Ghana, we said, right?
Yes.
And so, is it actually, I'm surprised, so this is a craft chocolate maker in Ghana. I thought you had to sell all of your chocolate to the central government.
Brilliant question.
Very,
So
very good
I'm just
question.
interested, is there really, being the bar chocolate making, is it even legal in Ghana? So I'm just interested in more general.
So several part answer to your question. The chocolate, the beans are from Ghana, the chocolate's not made in Ghana. So Abokfa is a cooperative, a cocoa ground cooperative. Mocha Origins
It's
is
originally coffee from Cameroon. Isn't
right,
it?
right.
Jeff is originally, that's what he got into.
Yep.
I mean, it's coffee and cacao,
Mhm.
but I think he was more focused on the coffee.
Yeah.
And then Cameroon cacao.
Yeah.
And then I'm not quite sure how he actually, I mean, because he also does Coca Camilo, so he also does Tanzania.
Yep.
He
He's
does
got Ghana,
latitudes
Tanzania,
to-
Cameroon. I
And
think he
but
has a
Cameroon,
Madagascar. I think.
I think he does. I think it's
I think
Uganda.
he does.
Maybe he does. I think it's
Uganda,
Uganda, yeah.
yeah.
But he, I mean, but Cameroon actually has his own farm too, doesn't he? So
Yeah.
your question about basically whether or not, I mean, I think there are more and more craft chocolate makers now who are able to source great beans. And in fact, this is a good segue to Kate. I think you should now give us, even though it's not a Abokfa, I think you should let us all taste
Sure.
some cocoa beans directly from
From Ghana.
Ghana.
Yes.
Do you want the plates to put them on?
Yeah, that would be great.
And while Kate's passing the beans around, I'll tell you that you're absolutely right. It's not legal to buy beans domestically in Ghana. Everything has to go through Ghana's cocoa board. But now I'll say something that might sound contradictory, and it kind of is, but we have plenty of beans of our chocolate makers there. And so everyone operates in a little bit of a gray area. We have beans of our chocolate makers, but it is very difficult for them because they have to get their cocoa in quite challenging ways. But yes, you're absolutely right. The cocoa is all supposed to move through Ghana.
And what sort of would you guess would be the premium they're getting versus the state price?
The farmer?
Yeah, the farmers, are they getting?
It's really hard to know. I mean, anyone domestically is paying a premium, but because Oh, thank you. It's really hard for them to publicize what they do because, for this reason, so I wouldn't be able to, there's no numbers on them and, but when you're based in Ghana, able to source beans from where you want to source them in a very specific way. And of course, all the makers do pay for that. They pay a premium to their farmers because they're getting exactly the beans that they want. They're not as free as uncommon cacao, as mocha, as taza, as dandelion to publish the prices that they pay. That wouldn't be at all acceptable.
Okay.
Yeah, in getting.
So this, by the way, are the beans. So that's sort of the nib inside one of them. And I'm assuming these are unroasted. So yes.
Ooh, they're really bright.
Lovely purple color.
So
Very
everything
bright.
that is sold in Ghana or was produced in Ghana is sold to the cocoa board. And then because traceability has become more of a question, if you think about it, Ghana actually has one of the most traceable supply chains in
100%.
all of cocoa. But since it's all sold back to the government and then exported from there, they have, this is organic and fair trade certified. So it's going to go into a separate warehouse and then shipped directly, but it's all, that's the side that's boring that I know about. And
No, it's not boring.
it's all really having the relationship and being registered as an available buyer. Because Ghana is kind of managing really from the government side, all of the inputs and all of the access for farmers. So it is one of the most intense kind of government support systems in cocoa farming, as well as restrictive. So it's kind of great and not great.
But I mean, the good thing though is that it is helping in the sense that you can now track the farms where you know where these beans are coming from. Whereas if you go to other parts of Africa, which we will go to in a minute, some other parts where you can do that too. But for example, now the world's largest cacao producing country is Cote d'Ivoire. That is notoriously far harder.
It's way harder. I mean, it's a mixed blessing, really, cocoa board's control over Ghana, because they, like we've been saying, they control all the export of the beans. It's really difficult for a domestic chocolate maker to access beans. On the other hand, as Kate's saying, like the regulation of the industry means that Ghana has the best quality bulk beans in the world. It's like there are many, many resources. There is so much oversight. Like every bag is graded 3 times before it leaves the country, and there's a lot of knowledge and skill and history behind it, thanks to cocoa board. And so it's a mixed blessing.
I think the other thing, which is we should probably dive into this for a moment and then sort of keep going on some other stuff. But the other one is the issue about child labor, because in the UK, there is, so we've just literally had Channel 4 dispatches with another program on sort of showing how the Cadburys are again using forced child labor. So I'm using my words quite carefully here. I'm not calling it slave labor, but I am sort of calling it forced labor. And kids are getting, it's certainly not the sort of labor which you sort of associate with acceptability. And yet, Ghana, I think, is probably in comparison to lots of other parts of the world, actually doing a much better job, because you can at least track this stuff down.
Definitely. I mean, and if you there's so few studies that have been able to give us good numbers on, forced labor in West Africa, and the ones that exist show very, 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 very low levels, so I feel like it's certainly not my experience to have witnessed, that what you see in the Cadbury film, or I know it's not a Cadbury film, I should correct what I just said.
Film about Cadburys.
So, I mean, it's not my experience, but I think that it's really important for us to continue to investigate this issue, because the truth is we don't know the extent, and we don't know always the kinds of we know actually a lot about why children end up in.
Yeah, so I think
divorce
that's what I was literally about to come on to.
Yeah,
Well, I
but
think
not
let's
how many are in these situations.
but let's talk about the sort of the wider issue, which is that in a sense that the tragedy for cacao is that it's become a commodity.
Mm,
And because it's been commoditized, there's a race to the bottom with the price, which, you know, Kate's trying very hard to sort of beat up
Yeah.
against. And, you know, and I think the problem there is that, you know, the average income for cocoa farmers in West Africa is still
it's low. I
it's
mean,
below
it's-
$1 a day.
Yeah, I mean, they do suffer and they do struggle for the most part. I mean, some people get very wealthy from cocoa. There's no doubt about it, you know, and historically there are cocoa scholarships, you know, many people built fortunes and had education and moved into the professional class thanks to cocoa, right?
Yeah.
Now that is not as much the case, you know, as it was when cocoa was first really booming
Yeah.
in Ghana, when it was like kind of the country was like flush with cocoa wealth, you know, as people were able to have large land holdings, grow a lot of cocoa really fast. Now you have tired trees, you have tired soil, you have a situation where farms upon inheritance are divided so many times
Yeah.
that they're just tiny. They're too tiny for anyone to make a living income from.
And I think the other point which we discussed a few times is, and one of your colleagues has done lots of work on, is to me the fascinating issue about if male farmers get paid 70, 80, 90 cents a day, but women are sort of down below 30 cents. And I think, you know, the child labor issue, in a way, addressing it, you know, you have to sort of think about some of the root causes. And you have this very interesting insight about divorce.
Yes. So, you know, and I will credit Dr. Amanda Berlin for my learnings about this, because it was Dr. Berlin's field work that really helped me understand this situation. And so I want to make sure I credit her very clearly, because what Amanda Berlin has shown us is that what some of the whys behind child labor and what she found after many, many months of immersive field work in cocoa growing communities in Ghana is that, you know, it is much easier for men to earn income from cocoa in West Africa. That much is very clear. If you have a household situation where the parents separate and, you know, could be an official legal divorce or not, it doesn't really matter. But if the man exits the household, the cocoa income goes with him, right? And so you end up in these situations where women and children are the ones who bear the economic brunt of divorce, right? And those are the cases where Amanda Berlin found that children were in the worst forms of child labor, because there was no primary breadwinner, let's say. Women usually have ways of making money, but it's not as big money as cocoa, right? And so if the men are not paying child support, if they're not contributing to the education of their children, those children have no choice but to work on cocoa farms just to try and get by. So it's really, we cannot understand, I think, the situation of child labor without understanding gender, without understanding household dynamics, without understanding divorce, right? I mean, these are some of the issues that don't make it into the newspaper articles in the film.
They will, I think they will. I mean, but I think there is some sort of hope, and let's sort of move to the next chocolate to use as the hope, because you get people. So the next chocolate we're going to move to is bar number 3, which is actually made in Norway by the wonderful Fjak. But it comes from beans which are sourced by Coca Camille, Simran and Brian, who set up a cooperative 7 or 8 years ago now. Coca Camille.
Social business, social enterprise.
But they secure much higher incomes for their farmers. And I think that, you know, to me, the fundamental problem with industrial cacao, mass-produced chocolate, is that it basically treats chocolate as a commodity. And if you do that, it's a race to the bottom and the farmers will never make money. And that's not just true of, you know, cacao, that's true of any other industry. But so, you know, the next chocolate we're going to have not only tastes great, but it has a great story behind it, which is this story that, you know, people will pay for flavor. And again, Kate, you've got the beans for us all to taste. But should we taste a bit of the chocolate first while we're going around with the beans?
Yeah, I've already tasted mine.
You've already tasted it, so great.
It's so different. I mean, it's such a remarkable difference between the Ghana and the Tanzania.
It is.
I mean, it's just so clear. Even more so, I think, than between the Sao Tome and the Ghana.
So I don't think you guys can hear us on this, but what we're sort of trying to get everyone to do now is to basically compare the Sao Tome, then the Ghana, and then the Coca Camille. And it just shows you how different growing conditions, and in particular with Coco Camille, they it's just a completely different profile.
Yeah, completely, totally different.
And
Yeah, and I mean, Brian's family was in citrus in the States, so the way that they interact with farmers, the extension kind of services and relationship is much more like you would find in kind of an agricultural environment in maybe the UK or in the US, where the proximity and I guess the reciprocal kind of communication and partnership is there, which is why I think they've been able to fine tune their post-harvest processing, really get down to consistent flavor and grow a number of really good businesses and contacts to be able to continue to grow and work with more farmers. And they're continuing to try and expand in Tanzania to support.
But how many farmers do they now have with them?
It's a few thousand.
It's a few- 1,500, that's what it was, 1,500 to 2,000. It's really growing.
Yeah, and
Oh,
No,
Strawberry?
the
So what
beans-
notes?
Beans.
Oh, strawberry.
Well, if you say the beans taste for a strawberry.
they're very, so the brightness of the chocolate, really, you get that from the beans. I feel like Spencer has heard the same thing as I have from many chocolate makers, who the best chocolate comes from the best beans. And so when you have a great start, it's just bringing out that expression and deciding which nuances you want to pull out and how long you want that roast and that profile to come through. But it really is exciting to kind of match and see how that expresses itself.
And it's a fantastic story because cocoa started in Tanzania back in the 1880s when it was a German colony, and it was very much planted as a commodity crop.
Yeah.
And it's only in the last 10 or 15 years that coffee's had this for a long time. People have been trying to get great coffees, and tea has obviously had it since time immemorial. But for chocolate, this is an exciting and an important new dynamic, which I think is probably the best way for people to actually have a chance at making money out of chocolate on the farm, because I can't see any other way that it will work. But yeah.
I'll just say something about this chocolate. A lot of the fruity chocolates, the flavors, and it can kind of go out of control. But this is like a very fruity, but it's very like contained. It's creamy and fruity, but it seems like it's consistent. It doesn't sort of like go all over the place, which I think is pretty unique.
Yeah, and it's very controlled the way you
Cool, yeah.
Very strong. It's really strong.
Yeah, no, I mean, one of the nice things sort of is that, we can sort of, we know what a Coco Camille bean can taste like. Omnom do a similar one.
It's true.
And there's a great new one, there's some great new ones coming out too. There's
From other makers.
Yeah, from other makers. Yeah, I mean, and actually, to be slightly controversial, actually almost I think it's all of Mast's cocoa now is from Coco Camille. So
Wait, all of Mast?
Mast, yeah.
Because they're coming back, right?
Yeah.
And they're like,
Yeah, I mean, and they, Simran has been supplying them for quite a long time. I'm not breaking any confidences here because I think they actually put a blog post out.
Yeah.
But I mean, hats off to Simran. I mean, it is an amazing job that he has done in showing that you can pay instead of what's the cocoa price at the moment, like $1,500, $1,800, $2,000.
Depends very much on the country, because depending upon the country, you're going to get a different percentage of the world market price. But in West Africa, it's around 1,800.
1,800, and I think they're getting, what are they getting, 3,500, 4,000. So and that's a significant premium, and the yields are going up, and it's just fantastic. And to keep it, sorry.
No, go on. I'll say something about Coco Camille price.
Go on.
Is that
Yeah.
The nice thing, I mean, when we talk about cocoa price, we talk like this in metric tons and world market price and stuff. What farmers are interested usually in Ghana is the price per bag, and everywhere is the price per kilo usually, or per pound. But what Coco Camille has really been a leader at in a kind of farmer facing way is they post the price right on the gate, so when I was with Coco Camille in Tanzania, that was the thing that I remember most strongly, was that the price they pay per kilogram is right there on the gate of their compound, basically. And outside of Ghana, where in Ghana, everybody knows the price because the government fixes the price and they announce it at the start of the season and it doesn't change. And so it's known, we could look it up right now and know it. Anyone can know the price in Ghana. Most countries don't work that way. Most countries, you kind of get whatever price the buyer is going to give you locally. But that was a really phenomenal thing that Coca-Cola did, was say, here's our price, you know, and in that way you become a price setter in the area because their price is better. You know, and so no one will sell to someone else for a lower price because it's really visible, and then everyone else has to kind of race to the top.
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah.
He's done a fantastic job.
It's amazing what they've done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what is the volume that they make? And not that I'm
You
probably
wouldn't-
understand that.
You
but-
would know more than me.
You would know that number. I don't
Yeah.
think it's an hour.
It's a few hundred tons.
A year.
Yeah.
It's got to be three. It's got to be above 3 or 4.
So that's really small
Yeah.
compared to like a Ghana.
So it makes it
Roughly.
about
Different.
300, I would guess. Yeah.
Different scale of trade.
Oh yeah. I mean, a bulk is going to be what, 35,000.
Oh, yeah, it'll be, I mean, in Ghana,
I'm
unless
not sure
you're.
I don't know where I got that number from.
I actually don't know where you got it.
I don't know where I got it.
In Ghana, if you're,
Ghana's about 390.
yeah, it's like the country produces between 800,000 and 1 million metric tons a year, you know, so even if you're in the low thousands, nobody really cares about you, you know, like
Yeah.
you're still really tiny, you know, that's like insignificant for Ghana. Whereas in Tanzania, that's really significant.
There's maybe like 14,000,
Yeah.
20,000
Yeah.
tons
Total.
beans in the total. in the
But I mean, I
country.
think
Yeah.
the weird thing about chocolate is that, you know, if you take specialty coffee, 20-25% in most countries of coffee sold now is specialty.
Yeah,
In
Yeah.
chocolate, it's what there are claims that it's
five,
Yeah,
no,
less
five,
I think it's like 0.5.
0.5.
I think if you 0.5 would be generous, to be honest. I mean, I know that there's a little bit of it which goes into couverture, but for bars, it's got to be below 0.5. Anyway, we can now move on with another story, which is to go to Madagascar.
Yeah.
Which actually, you know, I mean, ironically, Madagascar actually can even predate Santoni, because the first time cacao was grown in Madagascar, I think it was back in the 1820s,
Yeah, it was a long
1830s.
time ago.
But then there was they put it in the wrong place
Mhm.
where it's only just been started to be regrown. So they put it on the coast, and then they moved it to the sort of the valleys, and it grows much better. And this story is grown by a friend of yours and ours. Actually, it's crafted under the instructions of a Peace Corps volunteer called Brett,
Yes, Brett Beach.
with Boabab. Can't actually find the packaging for it, but
Oh, we had it.
we had it.
Yeah.
We'll find it later. But anyway, so but it's that one. Yeah, so there you go. The wonderfully named MIA, which does not stand for missing in action. It stands for Made in Africa.
Yeah.
So we've got notes of pistachio, citrus, and
You got this picture.
you got to give us again, because you had great notes there for it.
Mm.
Honestly, good. So what did you get?
Strawberry.
I also get a strong.
Yeah.
Everything tastes like strawberries.
So this is not good to be.
It's bottled wine.
Yeah.
Madagascar.
Pina colada?
Great, that's a great.
But I do think
topic.
that Madagascar, I mean, Madagascan
Two
cacao
berries.
does have these sort of, citrusy, very, pina colada is a new one on me, but it does have berries. Generally, I go more for raspberry than for strawberry, but this is definitely strawberry. This is definitely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay,
And
Madagascar.
now these beans are slightly different. These are actually Bertils beans, aren't
Yes,
they?
okay,
So these are from San Verano Valley, the same place,
yeah.
but
it's all
not quite the same
Not
as
the same,
States.
No,
Yeah.
no,
And they're actually not going to be fermented and dried in quite the same way.
no, It'll be different.
No.
Well, Brett's a man of cows. But should we
Yeah,
do you want to get the story of Brett?
Yeah, so Brett was a Peace Corps volunteer
If you can
in
hear it.
Madagascar, and has continued his relationship with Madagascar for many, many years now, and most recently through MIA, which is his company Made in Africa, as Spencer said. And the idea behind MIA is that the value of cocoa should stay as much as possible in the country where the cocoa is grown. And so if you make the chocolate in the country where the cocoa grows, you are creating jobs for people that are different kind of jobs than growing cocoa. You're creating factory jobs. You're creating different kinds of, you know, just industrial or creative work that people might not necessarily have had before, but you're also making a more expensive product, right? Everybody knows that chocolate is way more valuable, way more expensive than cocoa. And that keeps a lot of that value in the African communities where the cocoa grows. And so this part, the dark chocolate with baobab and salted nibs, I think we all know that Madagascar already has this really fruity flavor profile, but I liked the baobab addition because the baobab tree is an iconic African tree, right? In Madagascar, there's something called the Avenue of the Baobabs, which yeah, it's incredible. I was able to visit there some years ago, and it's just an extraordinary moment of walking down this long dirt road with these just towering baobabs on either side of you. And the tree does have a fruit, and you can make things out of the fruit. In this case, a powder that's been incorporated into the chocolate, and I think gives it this additional tang and fruits that just really complements the natural fruitiness of the Madagascar cocoa. So in this case, normally I like contrast pairings more than complementary pairings, but in this case, I love the complementary pairing. I think the baobab really works. And the salted nibs gives it, again, that just extra little dimension on your palate that enhances the flavor. So really, really nice company.
And intriguing flavors.
Well, really, really gorgeous chocolate.
We have lots of stock. Now, actually, for those of you who are actually on the Zoom call on YouTube, you can actually sort of see this picture of what a baobab tree looks like, because it is quite wacky.
Amazing.
It is the most extraordinary sort of tree. It is, yeah, it is like a Dr. Seuss tree without the spots, but it is just quite amazing. And it is, you know, and hats off to sort of Brett,
yeah,
for coming up with this intriguing idea of putting it on. And it is one of his best-selling bars.
I love this.
It does have great fruit, and it is just amazing. Now, Brett actually makes this chocolate in cooperation with a company called Menakau, which means sort of, you know, red in Malagasy, with Shaheen, who is, and one of the things that Shaheen does is he basically is very proud of the fact that there are many different peoples in Madagascar. And so what we're actually going to do now for our next two chocolates is to try two of his chocolates, again made with the same cacao that are in MIA, made in Africa, but this time we're going to first of all start with a milk chocolate, and then we're going to move on to an 80% dark chocolate, and see what you think of it. And the milk chocolate, you will definitely not get any snap at all out of the milk chocolate. The milk chocolate is basically, it's sort of like it's
creamy.
Just to sort of show you what's actually happening to it. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
It is basically, it's just wonderful.
That is outstanding. Oh, I could just.
Yeah, it actually.
That's.
No, actually, I think it's, I mean, because normally you don't sort of get that creaminess.
Yeah, right.
There's a sort of sharpness to it.
I know. Yeah.
And butterscotch. Caramel.
Yeah, this, the butterscotch.
The vanilla,
The vanilla.
which is what he's using in it, I don't think it's coming through nearly as strongly, but you just do get this amazing. So I think if anyone wants more of it, there's a lot more of this bar, although it will melt. Try. So this is grown in the Sambarano Valley in Madagascar.
This is from Madagascar.
This is from Madagascar. And just to put this in context, if the average cocoa farmer in West Africa gets paid like 80 cents a day, we know that the farmers who are growing this actually get paid over $2 a day. Because we've gone back, and that is just, and you know, the average income a day in Madagascar is only $1 a day. So they're getting paid twice that amount for growing this. Yeah. So Madagascar is one of the poorest places. Do try it with the 80%. Which is the next bar that you've got here. And actually, I'm going to preempt a comment. There's lots of extras. I mean, just
The 80 is also the 80 is also just.
Menakau is really great.
are amazing chocolate makers. No. So Shaheen basically works with a group of different farmers and different cooperatives there. He buys them directly. And he has his own factory on the island. He had the original factory making cacao in Madagascar was one called Choco Robert. And then he set this up with Brett and another partner. back in the 1990s, early 2000s, must be no 2000s actually.
For these guys?
For Menacau. It's late 2000s.
Yeah.
When they were
probably,
Peace Corps
I would
volunteers
say.
there.
The
Yeah.
gentleman you were looking for.
So with Brett, yeah. So, but I mean, this is again 80%. And so Mia's chocolates are made by Menacau. So yeah. So yeah, so Mia's chocolates are made by it. It's an 80%, but you would never, you know, there's no astringency to it. Just grab. Just grab.
I have to keep trying it over and over.
Oh, so-
Yeah, they do. It's definitely worth trying. Lots of times. Max, do try more. Go on, it's there for you. Try more. Yeah, no, go. So we have a quick vote inside the room. Which do we prefer, the milk or the dark? Coda?
Milk and the.
Milk or the dark? So the number 5 or number 6?
Depends on the day. Today, milk.
Yuri?
Yeah. I'll do milk.
Max? Matthew?
Milk there.
Wow.
But on a cool day or a rainy day, the egg.
Yeah, I think they're both
Yes,
pretty amazing.
but today,
It's great.
hands down milk.
It is. I mean, and it's a wonderful story.
And Madagascar is working with really interesting agroforestry systems.
Mm.
And it's something that there's a project right now, Zero, that is, you know, there are so many cocoa farms around the world that are already integrated in these amazing forests. They're they're either part of the jungle, so you'll have a canopy of cocoa trees and then a higher canopy above it. Or cocoa will be kind of integrated with other trees, but will be the main forest. And that's one of the biggest reasons why, in terms of conservation, and a lot of cocoa has come my way because someone has started with trying to solve a conservation problem and found that in terms of the economics, the way to conserve is to get connected to an economic stable source for cocoa. Because when you plant cocoa and you have a good income for cocoa, you're not tearing that down to plant short cycle crops. You're not, you know, disrupting as much, depending upon where, you know,
And depending on
obviously,
how.
and depending upon how. We do hear more often, I think, in the news about deforestation in places, and that also tragically does happen. But in so many areas of the world, cocoa is really something that can be a tool for conservation. And that's how a lot of the beans that we source are focused, which is why you see Peace Corps volunteers and people who are concerned around the world with those topics gravitating towards cocoa.
Yeah, I think the essential point is that cacao can grow in the rainforest. In fact, benefits from growing in the rainforest. It's less likely to get diseases because it's not going to get an epidemic, and it just, you know, it's phenomenal for its, you know, pollination and everything else. So if you can basically grow cacao in the rainforest, which is exactly what, you know, Madagascar is doing, exactly what all your guys are doing too, rather than, unfortunately, what happens in some parts of West Africa and what's been happening in Ecuador, which is basically people burning down the rainforest to, you know, plant modern clones and varieties. And that has sort of like two double disasters, one of which is it's obviously destroying the rainforest. But secondly, what people don't realize is that to grow a bar of chocolate like this, you need 1.5 to 2,000 liters of water, which is a lot. That's like, you know, a month to 2 months worth of baths. And so that's the reason why mass-produced chocolate is actually, you know, probably after beef, the worst food on the planet for environmental destruction. The BBC actually produced a great chart during COP27, COP26, whatever, COP22, whatever it was, when they basically sort of showed that, you know, it's sort of beef is the worst, but actually, even if you look at farm fish, actually industrial chocolate is just an absolute nightmare for the planet because it just requires so much water when you cut down the rainforest. So it is not good. But yes. So given that you all like to milk chocolate, the good news here is that we've actually found you another milk chocolate from Madagascar. And in this case, it is actually made from the beans that Kate was showing us a moment ago. who is one of the great superstars of the chocolate revolution, a guy called Bertil Ackerson, whose father was a Swedish diplomat who somehow or other ended up in Madagascar, and with a farm in Bejofo, I'm certainly pronouncing that wrong, in Sambarano Valley, and grows these amazing beans. And he was one of the first guys to actually sort of persuade everybody from sort of Bonat through to Valrhona to use his cacao to make these extraordinary flavored bars. And this one is crafted down in Orford, down where we'd all love to be because it's by the seaside, where we could all be sort of jumping in and out, very nice, cool waters. Well, not the Jurassic Coast, which is where some of our guests have been today. And this chocolate is actually a slightly higher percentage than the Menacao that we had. It's a 58%. But again, it has these lovely caramel and fudgy notes. So I will let you all luxuriate in this chocolate for a minute. And it's worth drinking with wine. What you can't see, or you probably can see, is that most of the people here, we strongly believe that red wine, because of the tannins in it, work extremely well with chocolates. And actually, for once, I think they're working pretty well with the milk chocolates, which is a surprise because it doesn't normally work as well as it does tonight. Normally, the tannins work better with the dark chocolates than they do with the red chocolates.
It must be the heat.
Yeah, it's something to do with the heat.
Definitely.
Or is that the
No, nothing's got coffee in it. No, I mean, well, there's traces of caffeine because obviously cacao has traces of caffeine.
in the dark 80%?
Yeah.
It is coffee. I definitely get coffee from the mocha. No, I don't think Palm Street.
No, Palm Street doesn't, Menacao does.
Menacao definitely adds
Yeah.
vanilla. Yeah, it's Madagascar
Oh, is that
vanilla.
Palm Street? Oh.
So the last one we've got is Palm Street, but Menacao obviously use vanilla because it's another great crop from Madagascar.
Yes.
And another great, very sad crop because it's sort of being destroyed and used for all sorts of drug smuggling and other purposes.
What, vanilla?
Vanilla is extensively used for drug smuggling and money laundering and other stuff.
That's like,
No, it's so light you can transport it. So it's a huge scandal.
and it's so valuable.
It is so valuable. So,
I've seen more projects now with intercropping with vanilla at origins popping up, which I think is kind of interesting when you look at the origins of cacao in Mexico and how it was kind of grown.
well, vanilla. I
Yeah.
mean, so I mean, there was this great story of the Aztecs actually conquering. I think it's the Copanistas or the Copanistas in the 7th century to get hold of their vanilla, and because they wanted to add it to their chocolate because they didn't have a lot of sweeteners. And we associate, well, actually, it doesn't really work, this logic, but the argument that put forward is that we basically believe that they attacked these people because they wanted vanilla in their chocolate. And in the West, we add vanilla to our chocolate because we associate vanilla with sweetening. But that's actually only since the 16th century, since Queen Elizabeth's homeopath, whatever it's called, sort of natural guy, basically started to make vanilla sweeties, which we all now associate vanilla with sweetness. But if you go to Asia, people don't think of vanilla as being sweet at all. They think of it as being spicy because that's what it's put into spice. Well, if you have a laksa, for example, if you have a spicy soup in Malaysia or something, they will actually add vanilla to it. So vanilla is not sweet, and it doesn't have. And if you put it on your tongue, you know the taste of it is definitely not sweet, and it doesn't have any of that flavor. It's somasensory perceptions because we're used to vanilla cakes, vanilla ice cream, and we associate.
Chocolate wasn't, you think of it sweet?
Yeah, although
Yeah.
we had it spicy.
Ooh.
Yeah.
They do.
I just didn't know the history when I was a kid and learning about.
But the reason why craft chocolate makers add sugar to chocolate is not to sweeten it.
To enhance the.
It's to enhance the flavor. So don't get that sugar is like salt, it enhances flavor. So you know, you can have, and if you have mass confectionery, then it will just be all about the sugar. But actually for craft chocolate, the reason why you add different percentages is because it brings out different aspects of the sugar. I mean, sorry, different aspects of the flavor. But anyway.
Right, where mass produced will add sugar to kind of cover flavors or mask and come up, you know, make it a homogeneous.
Yeah. So I think that's so the big difference between craft and mass produced is that it's all about the flavor of the bean and how you can enhance and bring it out. Whereas for industrial, you believe that you can do everything in the factory, which is a bit of a tragedy. Because you can't do it anything like as well. So no. So
What questions do you guys have about
yes. questions or comments on the chocolate?
Origins or anything.
And we're doing more of these conversations with Kristy. She doesn't know this yet, but we're going to be doing lots more of them with Kristy and with Kate. So you can sort of store them up. Yes, sir.
Questions. So,
That is good.
There you go.
as everyone's mentioned, Madagascar is famous for their fruity flavors, and I was just curious, do we think that's the variety of beans they use? Is it the terroir? Is it, you mentioned something about being in the highland versus the coast? What is it like? Or is it just the Atkinsons started out, or why is it always so fruity there? It's what everybody mentions.
Sure, and
Where does that come from?
yeah, and I think Plum Street has actually done a really kind of beautiful example of different genetic impact on flavor. And the way that I explain the genetics and the flavor of cocoa is that you might have a sort of base component, you know, of what you're capable of in the genetics of the bean. And then the next level is that terroir and the environment in which it's grown. And then that last bit is what you do after you harvest it.
Sure.
And that fermentation and drying process that gives you, in my opinion, preserves all the beauty of those first two, or in the worst case scenario, you struggle to bring it out because you're running into problems. And a lot of Madagascar is going to have some genetics that reflect the fruity kind of characteristics, but Atkinson's has a small plot of land that is Criollo, a sort of different bean. And you taste that bar from Plum Street and it tastes caramel, biscuit, completely different, but it's grown in Madagascar. So Madagascar's going to give you, you know, they work together, right? So it's not going to, everything in Madagascar is going to be citrus and that, or you know, fruity, whereas everything in, you know, this is why Spencer always recommends go beyond the country, because there are so many flavor profiles that you can find in a country, and some might be more consistent. So you might have fruitier origins like Madagascar or Peru that are going to consistently give you just a lot of different fruity flavors. And then maybe others like Ghana that are going to be more consistently cocoa, or I've had some really beautiful coconut kind of tropical but creamy notes from Ghana. And so they're going to be kind of on a different level. But that's what's so cool is that it translates completely from different vineyards in France or even in the UK. And so that's why, you know, when you dig in, you really kind of should try a couple next to each other and see how they change. But we don't have enough genetic, you know, and these are like, this is like my life work. Okay. I'm going to get there.
Yeah.
Information on the genetics, more information on the fermentation side, more information on the terroir, but you know, all of those factors, I would say yes, to a certain degree, but consider those factors when you're looking at a bar, where it's from, if you like it, and then if it surprises you, you know, see how it changes. And it's a conversation that I have with chocolate makers, and I'm sure Spencer does too, but from a different direction, is, you know, what does the post-harvest look like? And in some countries and with some suppliers, I'm sure if Atkinson's changed their post-harvest, and they're definitely doing a different post-harvest for different genetics. So,
and for different makers.
And exactly, and for different makers. So you can take the same beans and process them differently, right? You know, it's that same raw material, and you decide to make a dark chocolate, a milk chocolate, or something. But in this case, they're taking the same beans, and for however long they're fermenting them for, and the development of the flavors that happens through fermentation, they're deciding the expression. And it's the same thing that chocolate makers do in the roast. You know, do I like my steak well done? Do I like, you know, or that's a different, it's not an exact translation, but that's kind of the preference. And each one of them from the side of the farmer or the cooperative that are working with the beans at origin, to the chocolate maker that's getting these beans and doing trials to decide, okay, what do I want to express? Do I want to go with butterscotch? Do I find butterscotch and is that what I'm looking for? Or do I want pina colada or raspberry? You know, they're pulling things out and they're making decisions based on that, which is what makes, you know, the chocolate that we tried tonight versus what you might buy somewhere else so dramatically different.
But I think the other thing just to think about Madagascar is it's very small. So I mean, the total tonnage coming out of Madagascar of fine cacao is probably less than 1,000 tons. There was one interesting experiment done. So as I said at the beginning, I think in the 1820s to 1830s, the original place where they planted cacao in Madagascar, I was just trying to find it and I can't remember, is actually on the coast, but there were loads of cyclones which ripped it up. The Chocolat Robert actually replanted it there. And even though it was the same genetics, exactly as Kate was sort of saying, because where you ferment is actually very close to where you grow it, you know, in general terms, you've got a completely different microclimate. So you've got different yeasts, you've got different bacteria. The flavor of it was completely different. So most of us, you know, and I would include all you in this room at this, you know, once you've tasted a few Madagascar bars, you can recognize it. But that's because it's, you know, it is basically one bean varietal with a small exception with the Criollo, but they've got the same approach to fermentation and it's basically the same yeasts and bacteria. It's not the same on this coast and it really did taste radically different. But I mean, I think Madagascar, you know, there aren't that many sorts of beans. I mean, it's like Coca Camille is, you know, or Latitude is another great example where, you know, you've got one farm or sorry, one fermentation center where they, you know, and then it's up to the maker to figure out what he wants to do with it and how they can do it.
And that's
So
with this bar, number 3, it was very similar to the dandelion.
Yeah.
The same beans because the same fermentation.
Yeah, it's the same. It is the same bean. It's the same bean. It's the same fermentation. It's the same drying. I mean, people have played a lot with fermentation. So as Kate was sort of saying, the guy behind Pump Street, Chris Brennan, did sourdough bread before he did chocolate. And so one of the things that he now does is he sends out his sourdough yeasts to a couple of guys in Ecuador to basically ferment differently and to get different fermentation. He's done the same thing in Jamaica. And it is just quite extraordinary. Now, Ackerson's Berthold has actually done different dryings for Mikkel for his home. And it, you know, so literally
2 times turn, 3 times turn.
that's the fermentation.
Well, that's the fermentation.
That's the fermentation. The number of times you turn it, spring the oxygen, but he's actually used different drying techniques. And it's subtle, but you can definitely taste the difference. So it is sort of, you know, pretty.
Turned, double turned.
Those are Nicaraguans, and those are basically both 5-day fermentations. Chuno, I think that's what
it was because it was on our chocolate, my chocolate class that they.
But and they are subtly different. But I mean, basically, what happens is you allow more air into the fermentation, so it cools it down in the triple fermentation, and that will change all sorts of different aspects to it, from the acetic acid and the way in which the, you know, anthocyanins develop, etc. But I mean, you know, winemakers have known this because they've been playing with this for thousands of years, but chocolate makers have only just started to play with it in the last 5 to 10 years. Right. Anyway, we should get off the subject of our favorite hobby horse, which is what drives flavor in chocolate. But it is a very, very good topic. What other questions have we got? We must have some more. Or from the audience.
Yeah.
And Sam, you've got one. Are most innovations coming from within Africa? How much inter-Africa knowledge sharing occurs? And is there a lot of outside educators coming to these countries? Sam, that is a brilliant question.
It's a great question.
I'm going to let you answer that because I haven't. I
Yeah.
think you are much more expert at it than I am.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring the computer a little bit closer just so you can sort of read it.
Yeah, so a few part question here. Are most innovations coming from within Africa? I think it depends on the type of innovation. Where I've seen a lot of innovation in Africa, well, in Ghana, I can say, is around product. So it's very challenging, as we were talking about before, to source beans and make chocolate in Ghana, but it's also the challenge of chocolate is not a product that you can retail very easily in West Africa because the cold chain is not really it's not existent in many ways. And so chocolate isn't a product that people would necessarily want to even make. And so I've seen a lot of innovation around product that are cocoa based products, but that are much more shelf stable, that you can sell in the heat, that and crucially are much more attuned to local tastes, and so One of the great examples is a company called Ohene Cocoa. And what Ohene has done is mainly made nib-based products and things that you can sell at a market where they're not going to melt in the sunshine, but they're also in some ways very similar to local products that already exist. So a good example is Nkatier cake, which is a peanut brittle, basically, is very, very popular thing. You can find a street seller in Ghana might be carrying pieces of Nkatier cake, selling them in the traffic. And Ohene thought, well, if we're doing this with peanuts, why can't we do it with cocoa? And made basically
a nib-based bar.
Yeah, exactly. And so that doesn't go all the way to chocolate. There's no refinement process through industrial machinery. It's all done by hand. You can sell that anywhere in Ghana, but it also resonates with people because they're familiar with Nkatier cake. And so they will say, oh, I get this, and I get that it's cocoa because everyone in Ghana knows cocoa. So a lot of innovation on the product side. Inter-Africa knowledge sharing is a little bit shorter answer, I think, because there's not that much that I have seen. Ghana is the knowledge base in West Africa or in Africa, and Ghana Cocoa Board, where that knowledge is really housed, doesn't tend to do outreach, for its knowledge and its skill set. You don't see Ghana extension officers or Ghana, Cocoa Board folks going to other countries to kind of give tutorials or share their knowledge. It pretty much stays within. Yeah. So, but there's nice, interesting projects, I think, and we may be part of them, in future, where people are starting to move around a little bit within Africa and say, okay, we need to be sharing knowledge across our borders. And I
mean, it is an interesting aspect to the chocolate world, this aspect of secrecy. Yeah. So if you take, wine, they are very, very good at sharing amongst themselves, all different innovations, whether it be in packaging, whether it be in, sort of like these new egg things, which they've got to ferment the wine in. And the same thing is true in specialty coffee. Yeah. Whereas I think chocolate, bizarrely, is one of the most sort of closed and secretive industries around all aspects of it. So like even the science, we're having a conversation earlier on about flavor. Yeah. There are lots of things which the big chocolate companies understand about flavor, but they're not, publishing any papers on it, unlike the wine or the coffee or the beer or the bread industry. But hopefully we will start to sort of change that through the world of craft chocolate. Well, and I mean, on that same note, I just want to say a word about the final question in this particular one from Sam, is there a lot of outside educators coming to these countries? And by that, I'm assuming that you mean like people coming from Europe or the US or North America, to African countries to share knowledge. That's how I'm interpreting the question. The answer there is really no. And I think that on the cocoa side, certainly no one in Ghana would be interested in that, like say, why are you here? We don't need you, like we already know everything there is to know about cocoa, and rather it should be the reverse, it should be the reverse. Like it should be educators from Ghana coming to other countries to share cocoa knowledge. Although what do you do about diseases? So, one of the reasons why Ghana is now suffering from the Ivory Coast is swollen shoots. Yeah, but you have swollen shoot. There's a terrible virus. So one of the weird things about cacao is that it's always had a problem with diseases. So even when it was in the Amazon, it suffered very, very badly from diseases. And actually, back to Kate's point about why you should plant it in the rainforest and why you shouldn't try and farm it intensively, is that once you farm it intensively, and this is sort of what Brazil showed in their 1980s, 1990s, is that it's extremely likely that it will suffer from all sorts of literally pandemics, not just epidemics, but pandemics that would get wiped out. Now, in Brazil's case, it's because of bioterrorism, but the same thing actually happened in Ghana back in the 1940s and then again in the 1980s with this disease called swollen shoots. It was terrible impact. It's just disastrous for the farmers in Ghana. Really, really. Disease in cacao is, not, the whole history of cacao is best understood through disease, why it spreads, why it gets to different places. It's either human disease or cacao diseases, and it's not really properly written about. But no. And Nick has a question on one of my favorite topics, although Nick has spelt milk wrong, because he's basically talking about plant-based milks, which obviously under EU and UK laws, you can't call them milks. You have to sort of spell it with a Y or with an asterisk. if milk does not come from a lactating animal, it's not allowed to be called milk under EU law. So a plant-based milk has to be spelled differently. It should do. So it cannot be called, strictly speaking, it cannot be called. Yeah, and in particular in the EU, they've been really powerful. So they have to call it coconut-based milk. He's got a good one. But so is anyone doing anything interesting with milk in Africa?
Do you mean MYLCK?
Yeah.
Then yes.
That's the right answer for how you should basically pronounce it. Yeah, that's beyond me. That sounds like ice cream or sorbet by another name.
So with intercropping, because it's a great question, and I think in cocoa farming, when we talk about agroforestry systems and you talk about integration and an environment that is kind of regenerative, and you want different plants and you want different income streams. I love Nick's idea of making it like chocolate at origin is planted at the same place and then produced, but I'm not sure if almond production or.
I think the last things we need is more almond production. That is just not what we need. I know.
It's a question to say, what are the opportunities and complementary supply chains or value chains that exist in different origins? And it's part of what I've seen and what I've tried to work towards, which is when countries come together, everyone is very proud of cocoa farming in the country that they come from. And I would be too, because it's an amazing and difficult process, but coming together and sharing ideas is coming to a new level where you understand the amount of shade that is the sun intensity hours in different countries, and the level of agronomy needed to understand what the ecosystem needs. And these are all great questions. And I think that there are projects around the world that we probably need to bring together somehow to talk about what value chains work best in different countries, but it's going to be different also depending upon, because one thing is producing it. The other thing is getting it on a truck somewhere and having someone buy it.
Yes.
The other thing is exporting it, and then having someone, if it's a product that needs some sort of manufacturing and that's focused in some areas of the world versus others, then you have this global supply chain. Really, we're all connected.
Yeah. So actually on that one, Sam has a related question, which is, given we've got this disaster for climate change sort of, hitting us right now, and what's the future of African cacao?
I think it's a big question mark, really, because
disaster.
when we are in El Nino periods, which are the hotter, drier cycle, compared to the La Nina, cooler, wetter cycles, then the El Nino periods have been increasingly intense. And the West Africa, you see the results of, in the droughts. And now the drought periods are becoming intense. They're lasting for longer. They're more, just the rain patterns are shifting regardless. And so I think in this very moment, if you look at last year, if you look at this season, we're in a kind of good moment for cocoa volumes. Like the numbers are just only going up, right? So, is there a danger tomorrow? No, but
10 to 15 years.
I mean, it's
got to be the aquifer. It's got to be the aquifers.
Yeah.
Because the problem is, if you don't have the rainforest canopy, and Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire is down to 2% rainforest canopy now. Yeah. You are not able to resuscitate. You're not able to recycle that water.
No.
And then you get what the problem that Kate, very well, is what happens in Ecuador, which is Ecuador has never had a drought in its in millennia up until the last 2 or 3 decades, and it's because of deforestation. So it's bad news, Sam. So buy your stock now is the simple answer. Sort of start buying now, because it's going to get worse. And actually, seriously, it's so where does chocolate go? I don't know. The Chinese are trying pretty hard. The Indians are trying pretty hard. Whether or not they can do it is another question.
Yeah.
And I think
growing it, or you're saying buying it?
Growing it.
Growing it. They're Indians trying to.
The Indian is definitely trying.
Where in China?
Hainan. So down way south. I mean,
Yeah.
it's sort of, I mean, so again, it's very similar.
Close to.
Yeah, well, yeah, but also sort of same latitude as Vietnam. It's the big island. But yeah. Yes, Alex.
Just two very quick questions. First is, you talk about generally the latitude for cocoa growing is about 20 degrees. Has that changed, like with wine growing? So for example,
Yeah,
in
that's a
England,
good
sparkling wine is now grown here more
Because of the heat.
So has that slightly changed for cocoa over the last, I don't know, decades? And the second question related to intercropping, and you were mentioning disease earlier on. When there is cocoa growing, is there ever any complementary growing? Like, for example, in vineyards, you have rose bushes. So does that happen with cocoa growing as well? Like any plants to take away the
Peppers.
peppers?
Yeah, so the reason why Ackerson produces his pink pepper and his black peppers is, as Kate was saying earlier on, one of the issues about cacao is that it actually gets sunburnt. And so to get around this problem, Bertil actually planted lots of pepper trees, pepper vines rather. So I mean, like, this is where I'm going to go completely wrong, but the broad gist of this is that they get sunburnt. So you have to basically come up with a crop. And the crop that one of the crops that Bertil's taken is basically pepper. And the vines from that shade the chocolate. And he produces some amazing cacao with that on it. So
in Ghana, it's planting, it's always planting, right? And so you will never plant a cocoa seedling without planting next to it, because the planting grows really fast and provides the shade in the same way that the pepper does for Brazil.
And also it's the cross-pollination that you need.
Yeah.
So yeah, what was your first question again?
It relates to latitude. Is that changing in any way?
No, because
Like,
you need rainforest. You need rainforest because you need basically the bugs to cross-pollinate. I mean, unless we get what we have with vanilla, which is, I mean, don't get the reason why vanilla can now grow in Reunion and in Madagascar is because we hand pollinate. So once you can hand pollinate cacao, which is not a good idea because it would be pretty hard work.
I don't think it's sustainable long.
But that is how dates, of course, happen in California.
What are you saying then? What?
Hand pollinate.
The hand
They don't
pollination.
get hand pollinate. I mean, it's being used extensively now in China for all their fruits, and it is the way that vanilla basically moved because you need this peculiar bird. I mean, so basically, it was a slave kid in the 1850s who worked out how literally how to hand pollinate vanilla, which is what made vanilla take off in Reunion and then Madagascar. And cacao has the same need, which is you've got to cross pollinate because otherwise it won't fruit. And I've never heard of anyone cross-pollinating by hand in cacao.
Oh, yeah, in Ghana, they do
Ghana,
that.
they-
Oh, there you go. So yes, so possibly they could. So
Yeah,
there you go.
cocoa,
I
it's
absolutely
a-
no idea.
it's a-
Cross pollinate the kids. They
No, they have teams.
Scientists.
Yeah.
It's like that's
Cocoa
like the
research
research of the change.
Basically trains people to go out and
I didn't know
pollinate.
that.
So these
Yeah,
are the scientists
teams
going
of
out to
youth,
cross
they hire
pollinate.
And really what you're
To go,
looking
like,
for
tons of
for
jobs.
pollination
That's right.
is just that
Women,
ecosystem
often
that has,
women do it,
kind of,
yeah.
you have mulch on the ground and cocoa is pollinated not by bees, but by midges, so smaller little insects that,
Ants. Those
And-
bloody ants which bite you.
no, it's not.
It is dangerous. If you get bitten, and you really do get bitten.
It's and so you want that kind of slightly untidy environment for pollination to happen. And I think part of the question mark is what genetic varieties can cross-pollinate versus can auto-pollinate.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've had the ability to go see some research centers and talk to different researchers who are trying to really understand, do you need to have a genetic diversity on your farm to increase productivity because you want that pollination, that cross-pollination and that kind of environment. But in terms of planting in new locations, I really haven't. I've seen that some areas where coffee has been grown in Colombia is now apt for cocoa. But that's really, I think, an example of a country that has a really strong infrastructure in one product and is identifying the deterioration of quality in certain altitudes of coffee and trying to, you know, kind of integrate a new product. But I think, yeah, absolutely. I've been to a wine tasting and heard that the UK is going to have the next champagne region.
It does. It's really got it. It's got it. It's got it now. It's got it now. Oh no, no. South Coast. Well, I mean, so the basic Sussex all the way down. Sussex all the way down to where you were, the Jurassic Coast. No, you should. And they've got some intriguing grapes too.
So, yeah,
So, well, I think it'll be time before the Eden project basically grows cacao at any sort of scale. But no, I feel
They
that
have a few, yeah.
they do have a few.
Yeah, they
They
have
do
a
have
few.
a few. Whether we grow our own cacao. Well, there's 2 trees inside Chelsea Physic Garden, and there's a couple inside Kew Gardens, and apparently there's a bunch inside the Eden project.
Eden has a lot, because I was just there, it was a lot.
Right, but enough to make at least 10 bars a year. Right, I think on that note, we should thank everybody very, very much, because we are getting on and we're all melting here.
Like our chocolate.
Like our chocolate, which we've
is
actually made.
delicious, which was, I actually have cleared mine.
You have cleared your plate, but this, yes, we've basically cleared out most of it.
Yeah.
A huge thanks to all of you at home and watching in, and a huge thanks to all of you who came in, but above all, a massive thank to Kristy for coming off the boat all the way from South Africa. So thank you very, very much, everybody. And Kate, thank you very, very much. But Kristy, I cannot thank you enough. We'll have to get you to come back again soon. Good.
Thanks,
Brilliant.
thanks for inviting me.